Music, good evening. I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. It's day 2 of testimony in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, and the prosecution star witness, his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura, taking the stand. The disturbing video of Diddy and Cassie in an LA hotel hallway, one of the sparks that really ignited this case today. For the first time in 6 years, Cassie coming face to face with Diddy, telling the jury in graphic detail about what they say is the darker side of the rap mogul over the span of their 10-year relationship. Cassie admitting she was young and initially wanted to make him happy by fulfilling his sexual desires, but quickly became reluctant. Ventura says the freak-offs took up so much of her time, it felt like a full-time job. When she didn't cater to Combs's desires, he became violent and abusive, bashing and stomping her head at times in the courtroom. Hearing the explicit details of these sexual escapades, Combs's mother and children back for a second day in a row. Prosecutors argue Combs used power and fame to lead a criminal enterprise for 2 decades to allegedly abuse, threaten, and force women into drug-fueled sex marathons that lasted for days. Strongly denies all of these allegations. If convicted, Combs could face life in prison, a stark contrast to the life of luxury he's known for. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. We'll take you inside the courtroom in just a moment for the emotional testimony, and we'll also take a closer look at Cassie Ventura, the singer and now star witness on the stand. Let's go to Aaron Katersky. He was inside the courtroom for all of it, and he joins me now from Lower Manhattan. Aaron, this was the first time that Cassie Ventura and her ex Sean Combs have seen each other since 2000. What was that moment like in the courtroom? When she walked into the room, Sean Combs appeared to look at her, but Eva did not seem to look at him. And during her testimony, I'm not sure she really made eye contact with Sean Combs. She turned occasionally to her husband, Alex Fine, who was seated in the courtroom, had other members of her family, her attorney, there in support, but she recounted such graphic detail, too graphic for us to discuss here now, in such soft-spoken matter-of-fact tones, describing degrading sexual activity that she said Sean Combs forced her into starting when she was 20. She called herself naive, too naive. She said to really understand what was going on or understand the power dynamics in the relationship, because she said if it turned him on, that's what they did. Her preferences weren't at all considered, and she said she was passed around and objectified by men with other men she didn't want to be having sex with. On Sean Combs's whim, describing how he wanted to set up recording equipment to record these freak-offs, she said it made me feel insane. She said it was humiliating and disgusting. Aaron, Cassie shared that she didn't have a whole lot of sexual experience. Before she met Diddy, she was only 19 when she met them. There's a nearly 2 decades age difference between these two. Talk more about that power dynamic and how their relationship changed over time. While she was 19 and a young singer, and Call signed her to a 10-album deal with Bad Boy Records. So a long-term deal, and she said Eva that she only made 1 album. Otherwise, the freak-offs took up so much of her time that it stifled her music career, but it controlled her financially. She said, so she felt like her livelihood, her career, her life really depended on Sean Combs, keeping him happy. Otherwise, she said she feared what might happen. Now, interestingly, she talked a lot about not wanting him to break up with her. Now, whether that was because she thought he might get violent or because she would lose some of the life that she had acquired, she didn't really say. But we know that the defense is expected to argue that, sure, Sean Combs and Cassie had a toxic, violent relationship. The defense has called her a strong adult woman who made a voluntary choice. Aaron, you were in that courtroom. These details were a lot. What was the jury's reaction? Hearing her testimony, it's really hard to read the jury. Most of them are pretty stone-faced. There was one woman who did seem to be following along. She would occasionally smirk at the mention of baby oil or lubricant, which was used so frequently that, as Ventura described at the hotel rooms where these freak-offs occurred, were left in complete disarray. There was candle wax and oil everywhere. But most of the jurors sat stone-faced, listening to what amounts to the humiliating recollection of a decade's worth of a woman's sex life. Aaron, what can we expect to see in court tomorrow? More of the same. Cassie Ventura ended her testimony today, taking jurors to a moment they've already seen video of what happened in the Los Angeles hotel in March of 20. The jury had already seen the video, but they saw it again with Cassie narrating it, saying, "That's me," pointing to herself on video, telling the jury this was the first time, the first and only time, she tried to escape a freak-off before Sean Combs declared it over. She said she got hit by Combs, she had a black eye, and she wanted to leave. But when she tried to, as the jury saw in video, he dragged her back. Aaron Kursky for us there at the courthouse. Aaron, thank you so much, and let's break all of this testimony down and what it means for this case with ABC News legal contributor and trial attorney Brian Buckmeyer. You were also in the courtroom this testimony. I mean, the details of this testimony from a legal standpoint, what stood out to you? So, from a legal standpoint, there are a few quotes I want to look at that I think kind of run the gambit of what we're talking about here. We have Cassie Ventura here, and some of her quotes saying, here after the freak-off, the room was pretty bad off, the candle wax, the over the place, and then she described having a pungent smell, and she brought us into those rooms in a way that made us think no one wants to be in there. The only way you can be in there is to be compelled. I think that fed into the government's argument of coercion. But we also heard something that I think the defense is going to jump on, where she talked about that she was insanely jealous. And we remember from Tenny Garagos, she said that this case was about love and fidelity, jealousy and money. And so I think something like this, Sean Conn professing to be a man of many women, Cassie potentially being jealous and maybe starting some of those fights or participating in the fights, that's something the defense is going to jump on. And then, of course, this saying that she's super young and naive people pleaser, getting her personality. I think her testimony really drove home the idea that this was a horrible interaction, that it was a toxic relationship, as Aaron is quoting the defense. But also, I think there's something that both sides will be able to use from her testimony, that she was trafficked as a government is arguing, but also that this could just be a domestic violence case where the defense might be able to argue not these crimes, other crimes he's guilty of, maybe not guilty of trafficking and racketeering. She also talked at some length about the control that he had over her and the other people on his staff that helped participate in that. Why do you think that was so important? All right, so I think the smart thing to do, like start off is talk about Cassie's age. She's 38 years old now. Sean Combs is 55. The age gap was one thing they touched upon. The fact that she was his singer and signed on to his label as a singer, and she had done some modeling in the past, and that he had the ability to control whether or not her music got out. We also saw the testimony about who was in his inner circle. We saw her talk about bodyguards and chief of staff, and to Aaron's point, she was very matter-of-fact and soft-spoken when she spoke. What I saw when she talked about those bodyguards and saw pictures of them, and it's almost like she started to tremble in her voice a little. You can see a sense of fear as she recounted who the people were.
And no longer has a voice who will pursue justice for her accusation.
Someone would come
as of the
find
indictment
her.
against Diddy.
And I think that
no
really
expansion of the investigation,
of this
no isolation
enterprise.
orders,
Again,
no equipment
you were
access,
in the courtroom
no suspension
today.
of attorney
What was
communication.
The jury's reaction?
Everything
Hearing
inside
all
solitary
of this,
block C
I
continued
think
as before.
They continued to
Everything
watch, you
except
saw
the fear.
Some people
if a female
feverishly
warden can
taking
vanish
notes
after a
in the
single
back.
note, thing
But I
except
think
the fear.
as the
If a
testimony
female warden
continued
can
and
vanish
everyone
after a
leaning
single
in,
note, ones who
listening,
once
they
worked
were somewhat
overnight in that
stoic.
area,
I didn't
the
see
ones who
anyone
filed for
really,
leave without giving a reason,
like
the ones who
jaw-dropping
saw
about
but
some
never
of
spoke.
these
No one
allegations.
mentions the note,
Of course, you
but
saw
everyone
some
knows
people,
it appeared.
as we see in the
And if what what it
courts
says is
shaking
true,
their head
then
as
punishment.
to some of
Part
these
3.
statements
The person no
because they
longer
were
in the
very,
system. The
very
internal
horrible
personnel
and hard to
database of the
listen to
Atlanta
at
Federal
times.
Detention
At the
Center
very
updated
beginning
its
of the
weekly
day,
roster.
we heard
Under the
from
category
a
Special
male
Personnel
escort
Code
that
Adjustment,
testified
the name of
that he
Warden
saw
TD
Combs
was marked
attack
as removed from
Cassie.
system
What
by
stood out
administrative
to you
order.
about his
There was no
testimony?
decision number recorded.
Yeah, and
It
so
was deactivated.
Xavier Donaldson
Her
was a
personal
defense
contact
attorney who
information
continued the
disappeared from the internal
cross-examination.
network
And what
exactly
stood out
30
to me is I think they're still kind of attacking the strategy of attacking the credibility as well as the idea of consent here. And so from there were two things. One, Daniel Phillips said that he actually had feelings towards Cassie, and there might have been, again, this issue of jealousy that I think the defense tried to hone in on. But of course, the government came back and talked about just the brutality of Sean Combs's interaction with Cassie, the directing of the sexual encounters, who got paid, how they got paid, and again, just the brutality of the interaction that he saw with them. Brian Buckman, thank you so much. We'll come back to you in just a little bit. Cassie Ventura's testimony today detailing graphic allegations of domestic violence, which she says she experienced while dating Sean Combs, violence that the defense admitted to in opening statements. To talk more about domestic violence, let's bring in criminal defense attorney and ABC News legal contributor Bernardo Vallona, who has handled sex crime cases, and former NYPD sex crimes detective Sarah Motz, who also notably worked on the Harvey Weinstein investigation. Thank you both so much for joining with us. Bernardo, start with you. The defense admitted in opening statements that Combs got violent, but say that doesn't mean he was trafficking people. So, does the violence matter here? The violence absolutely matters here, because it's the violence is what actually quieted Cassie, as to not say anything for all those years. Look how long it took her to finally say something, and that's a common issue that you see with domestic violence victims, with sexual assault victims, because it takes them a long time, number one, to realize that they were victimized, and two, to have the courage to come forward and actually speak to other people about what happened to them. But three, look what happens behind closed doors. You just never know what happens behind closed doors. So this violence, this her being scared, is all a part of the violence and the crimes that took place here, and what the prosecution is moving forward in front of this jury piece by piece. Sarah, you've investigated a lot of cases. How does violence factor into these types of situations? Well, I think this shows just what Shan Holmes was capable of, and it just shows the toxicity that was surrounding Cassie Ventura in her life. I think being a man of power and having the financial means that he had, and having the control over her, I think that all just led into this whole situation where now she has the strength to stand up in court and to speak her mind and state the facts and tell everyone happened. And she is strong, and she was a victim, and now she's able to speak up for herself and show the world that she's strong and that she's able to come over this and excel in her life and move on. Bernardo, we saw text messages between Cassie and Diddy today. The defense already said they think the messages show the consensual nature of their relationship. I'm curious, though, what's your reaction to those text messages? So when Cassie was testifying about the text messages, she also put it into context as to why she sent those text messages, what was going on in her mind, that she wanted to satisfy Sean Combs, that she wanted to be a part of this in the sense of that she was scared that if she didn't participate, what would happen to her. These are also common signs of people that are domestic violence victims, that are sexual assault victims, that you see ultimately going to see later on during the trial an expert come in and testify as to how and why victims like these react the way they do and are capable to send these texts that may look consensual to other people, but when you break it down mentally, you're able to see that this is a victim person that is broken, a person that has been tainted, a person that has been brainwashed as a result of the violence and the control that Sean Holmes had over her. Sarah Cassie didn't come forward until 2023 with her civil suit, years after this relationship ended. In your experience, why do victims wait to come forward? Well, you know, every victim's story is different, and some victims respond to trauma differently. And with this situation, maybe just out of fear, like I said, he had full control over her, full control of her financially, and just based on her reputation, society, the emotional aspects, the psychological aspects that she's had to deal with. So these things take time, and she's doing it now, and she should be proud of herself, and we'll see how this pans out. Sarah Matters, Bernardo Villona, thank you both for being with us. Still ahead, prosecution versus the defense, the strategy from both sides when it comes to Cassie's testimony and the portrait they're trying to paint of Sean Diddy commas. We'll be right back. Music, welcome back to ABC News Live, Day 2 of testimony in the Sean Diddy commas trial. His ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, taking the stand, revealing never-before-heard details about days-long drug-fueled sexual encounters with prostitutes. Cassie saying if she refused to participate, commas became violent, and that the freak-offs became a job where there was no space to do anything else but to recover and just try to feel normal again. Our ABC News legal contributors, Brian Buckmeyer and Bernardo Villona, are back with us. We're going to have y'all take sides today. Brian, you're the defense. Bernardo, you're the prosecution. Brian, let's start with you. If you were the defense attorney sitting there, hearing all of these details, what are you thinking? If I'm the defense, I'm actually not that worried, because in a case like this, they've already conceded that there is allegations of domestic abuse and violence, and I'm waiting to see the government make the connection between this is simply a man and a woman, a man, because we're hearing that the violence from Sean commas on to Cassie, just brutally abusing her, hitting her, all the things that we said were indefensible, but we're not seeing the connection of, was this force used to compel her to go across state lines for trafficking, or was this simply a man who was a voyager, who liked to participate in these sexual escapades that we may not agree with, but in the course of that, he used violence. So I'm looking to try to slice this with a scalpel rather than come in with a hammer and just kind of pick the case apart little by little. Bernardo, how do you think the prosecution did today? What are they trying to do here? So the prosecution is definitely laying out a picture, a story of the life of Cassie with Sean commas, and especially the violent nature of it, but then the sexual nature of it. And I think what they're doing is piece by piece, they're laying out all these freak-off moments, and now they're starting to get to the nitty-gritty part, meaning the most extreme ones, the ones that shock the conscious. For example, when she mentioned that Sean commas would have her participate in these freak-offs when she was on her menstrual cycle. I think that right there shocks the conscience, and the prosecution did a great job in ending with that line of questioning to show the jury that, look, this is not just domestic violence, this is not just people having consensual sex, this is the type that no one will want to engage in. And Brian, the defense, has admitted that commas had non-traditional sexual preferences. Cassie at one point was on the stand, flipping through a binder of escorts that they used. We can't even say out loud some of the things that occurred on this show. Do you think the defense can really convince this jury that Cassie and these other alleged victims wanted this? No, I don't think so. I don't think that you can take any of these allegations and say, of course Cassie wanted to do, and again, we're going read it, because some of the
present
things
and no longer
we're
has
not
a
allowed
voice
to
who will
rebut
pursue
the
justice for her
brutality,
accusation.
the coercion,
As of the taken against Diddy, no expansion of the investigation, no isolation orders, no equipment access, no suspension of attorney communication. Everything inside solitary block C continued as before. Everything except the fear. If a female warden can vanish after a single note, nothing except the fear. If a female warden can vanish after a single note, ones who once worked overnight in that area, the ones who filed for leave without giving a reason, the ones who saw but never spoke. No one mentions the note, but everyone knows it appeared. And if what it says is true, then punishment. Part 3. The person no longer in the system. The internal personnel database of the Atlanta Federal Detention Center updated its weekly roster. Under the category Special Personnel Code Adjustment, the name of Warden TD was marked as removed from system by administrative order. There was no decision number recorded. It was deactivated. Her personal contact information disappeared from the internal network exactly 30
about every little thing down to what these rooms looked and smelled like after these freak-offs, the number of baby oil bottles used each time. Why do you think these details matter here? So, Eva, the isn't details when you're determining credibility, when you're determining believability. You want the witness to try to give you as much details as possible to determine whether that person is telling the truth. So that's why the prosecution is heavily focusing on these details, because in the end, this case rises and falls on the testimony of Cassie Ventura. And in order for the jury to find a credible and believable, they have to look at our testimony as well as a demeanor, as well as anything that corroborates her testimony, and evaluate all of that to determine, in fact, whether Sean is guilty of these crimes. So the devil's in the details. So they have to get it out. Brian, as a defense attorney, how do you handle a cross with a witness like Cassie without taking off the jury? Personally, I don't do it. I think I would first hire someone like Bernardo Villalone. Think that defense is doing something very similar to that. One of the women attorneys are going to cross-examine Cassie Ventura for a number of reasons. One, this is a woman making allegations of sexual assault on that of a man. And two, she is pregnant. The optics of that would look horrible if someone like me does this. But I think the other aspect of it, from a technical standpoint, very careful. Don't raise your voice. Don't get into an argument. Be as soft-spoken and careful as her, but be deliberate in your words, and trying to say, you said this one day, and now you're saying this another day. So which one is it? Don't get into a battle with her, because you're not going to look good doing so. Brian Buckmeyer, Bernardo Villona, thank you both for being with us. Coming up, who is Cassie Ventura? A closer look at her time as an emerging star in the spotlight, to the star witness in the case against Diddy. Stay with us. Music. Welcome back. Cassie Ventura is the star witness in this case against Sean Diddy. Comments. But before all this, she once shined as an up-and-coming singer who had a recording contract with Diddy's label Bad Boy Records. Tonight, a look at Cassie, who she was, and for that, we turn to our Kelly Carter, who covers entertainment and pop culture for us. Kelly, take us back to 2006, when her first album was released, and Cassie was just starting to make a name for herself. Who was Cassie Ventura? Yeah, let's go back even a little bit further to really put her into context, because in 2004, you have Sierra dropping her debut album in 2005, Rihanna drops her debut album, 2006, Cassie comes around and drops her debut album. And really the landscape was very ripe for R&B pop princesses to kind of take over, and she really had looked as if she was going to fit nicely along what we were hearing on the radio and what we were seeing in music videos. She was discovered by Ryan Leslie, who is a songwriter who has written hits for people like Beyoncé, Britney Spears, and of course, Sean Cummins. And it seemed as if all of the ingredients were there for her to fit quite nicely in this scope of the R&B music scene from young women. So it sounds like she was such a promising young star. What happened here? What happened is, we kept waiting for more music to come. When that first album came out, it lived on the top 20 for a couple of weeks. Then it was like,
nothing. You know what you've been hearing a lot in today's testimony is that she signed this 10-album deal with Bad Boy Records, but only one album came out, and for the longest time, people kept waiting to hear more, see more, what was going to become of her, because we saw her red carpets, right? And then we had to wait about 6 years after that debut album from her drop to get her on a Nicki Minaj track, and I thought maybe that was going to, bring some new music from her. We kept hearing Sean talk about how she was constantly in the studios working with producers, but we really weren't hearing any new music, and certainly no new albums. Cassie, as we have been able to see, is very pregnant right now, about to have her third baby. What more do we know about her life? Now it seems very quiet, far more quieter than it was when, of course, she was with Sean, because we're seeing, as we keep rolling, a lot of red carpet footage, a lot of event footage. It's a quieter life, and it seems very sweet. He is someone who often makes a lot of proclamations on social media, on Instagram, about how he wishes the days were longer, so that he could have more time spent with his sweet wife, who is the bestest, in his words, the bestest mama that could ever be. And they're about to have their third baby. So it's quiet and obviously much more regulated. Kelly Carter, thank you, as always, for being with us. Thank you. And thank you so much for streaming with us. We'll be back with new episodes every day of the trial, right here on ABC News Live, Disney Plus, and Hulu weekdays at 5 Eastern for even more on the Diddy Trail. Make sure to follow our podcast, Bad Rap, The Case Against Diddy, hosted by our very own Brian Buckmeyer, on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Eva Pilgrim, New York. Have a good rest of your day. Music